Spot rates are up 27% year over year, tender rejections climbing past 14%. The ATA says we're 82,000 drivers short. I'm not sure if I quite believe that. And the gap is getting wider every quarter. There's a truck running freight between Dallas and Houston right now, and nobody behind the wheel. And every recruiting department in America is staring at a phone that won't stop ringing with leads they can't reach fast enough. Welcome to Trucker Talk Radio. You're on Behind the Wheelhouse with J and J. I'm John. This is Justin. Justin's riding shotgun with me as always. Folks, if you're running a fleet right now, you already know what I'm about to say. If you can't recruit, you can't run. It's that plain and simple. Which is why I'm fired up today about today's guest, because the man sitting across from me did not grow up in a truck. He did not come up dispatching freight. He did not inherit a yard. He came from the outside, looked at one of the most overlooked, duct taped, legacy software dominated corners of this entire industry and said, I can build something better than this. And then he did it. Today's guest is Francisco Lopez Roualdes. Hopefully I got that right. Co-founder and CEO of Double Nickel. 8 years at Boston Consulting Group, where he made principal before he was 35 years old. Lending director at Klip, one of the biggest fintechs in Latin America. He got his MBA from Columbia Business School, born in Argentina, built in Buenos Aires, sharpened in New York. In June of 2023, Francisco and his co-founder, Elif Kenli, hopefully I got that right as well, walked away from all of that, set up shop in Brooklyn, and pointed every bit of that horsepower at a problem most software founders wouldn't touch with a 40-foot trailer. How fleets actually hire truck drivers. 3 years later, here's where Double Nickel stands. Maverick Transportation, 1,600 trucks. Nussbaum, 550 trucks, runs on Double Nickel. Custom Transport, Universe Carrier, Panhandle Express, the list goes on and on. Real fleets, real iron, real freight. And Double Nickel is doing it with a team of just about 10 people out of Brooklyn Loft, unless they've had a big hiring spree in the last couple of weeks. While the giant they're chasing, we all know their name, and we'll get into that, has been the 800-pound gorilla of driver recruiting software for over 20 years. 10 people in Brooklyn going after the industry's incumbent and winning rooms. Francisco, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I'm flattered. I haven't seen it put it like that, but it sounds pretty good. So I'm pumped for what's to come.
Well, you'll have the recording soon. You can take it into meetings with you.
There you go.
Before we dig in, we want to thank our sponsor, ReadyApp. ReadyApp gives you one verified driver profile. Fill it out once, work history, qualifications, documents, all in one place. Hand it over once, or fill it out once, share it forever. Sign up at ready-app.com. Be verified, be ready. Francisco, I got to start here because this is the question I think a lot of folks are listening and want to get answered. You went from Boston Consulting Group, which is the literal definition of high-end strategy work, to Klip in Mexico, to now running a software company that lives and breathes truck driver recruiting out of Brooklyn. Walk us through that path. How did that happen?
That's a great question. So before I go into that, I think one side note, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but I think oftentimes people, look at us with a little bit of a raised eyebrow, and it's like, you guys don't come from trucking, have never dispatched a track.
Hmm.
How does this make sense? Why should I try my business with you? And I think what we typically try to say is, I think this is such a complex problem that oftentimes it requires like a different lens, no? And we bring that in the sense that we don't have a preconceived notion of how driver recruiting should run.
Right.
We listen to our customers, we go into their terminals, we see their teams operating and say, okay, how can we make this process better, more efficient, more streamlined? Going into my background, that's what we bring. And that's what me and my co-founder bring into the space is a way of tackling, you talked about BCG, a way of tackling challenges with a different lens, and breaking down problems in a way that are easier to sort of understand and digest and tackling those one by one. And that's the approach we've taken to Double Nickel. But answering your question,
Okay.
grew up in Argentina, came to the US for grad school, continued my career at BCG where I started back in Buenos Aires. And I think very soon a few things came to to mind, and I realized one is I felt very far away from the problems that I was solving for some of our clients. They were, mostly Fortune 500 companies. I didn't feel very related to it. I felt that a lot of the work that we did had impact, but it was very far from the front line. And that's where I decided to take a step back and say I want to join a smaller company. I want to actually make an impact on a problem that I care about, that at some point was, at that point was financial inclusion. Then COVID came to be, and I think one thing that struck me very clear is like, and that took me to trucking as a like manifestation of that problem is some of these labor imbalances or industries that are suffering from labor imbalances or labor challenges, where in trucking specifically, the demand for truck drivers has continued to grow. Most of the growth in the economy every year comes, in the end there's, goes through trucks, and the demand for trucks continues to grow faster than the economy. But that job it has become less and less attractive to the talent pool. I think over the course of the years, people want to stay more at home. There's less sort of, there's more hyperconnectivity, and people want to be closer to home, want to enjoy more home time. It's also very, it's a very risky career, from a lot of perspectives. Um, but the industry and our economy requires it. So I think that was a little bit of the problem that took us to trucking, as we were, I come from a family in the automotive space. My father spent 40 years at Ford, very close to transportation. My grandfather spent another 40 years at GM and Chrysler. So there was a little bit of a coming back to me, where we combined something I was very passionate about and that COVID really sort of, blew up, that is this labor imbalances,
Mhm.
uh, and the trucking industry. So that's a little bit of how this came to be. And as we started digging into it, we were like, hey, there's something that seems to be broken here, then that we can put our heads together to try to sort of, I wouldn't say fix, I think that's a very ambitious goal, but alleviate for some of our
Mhm.
fleets.
What are some of those issues that you seen when you first started getting into it and checking it out? Like these are some things that, that I know I can make a difference in.
To start off, I think there is like there's always this discussion about the driver shortage. Is there a driver shortage or no? I think it's a little bit of a void discussion. I think once you do a double click, in the end, what you find when you go and sit with these fleets is that they have a hard time finding enough drivers in the time period that they have that meet their qualification criteria to get them on orientation in the next few weeks. I don't know if that is a driver shortage from a capacity perspective. I don't know how you call that, but I think fleets struggle week in, week out to find drivers to put in their next orientation class that are qualified and meet their insurance minimum criteria. I think you can call that way, but that
Mhm.
was one of the things that we saw right away. And I think when you looked into that process, you realized that fleets that could move quicker, could have more efficient workflows, um, we're able to actually get a driver quickly from, first conversation to we're doing better. And we're
Mhm.
actually keeping their trucks more full and actually spending more time vetting candidates and making sure they were a better fit. So keeping them beyond the 30, 60, 90 day. So I think part of that is what we saw when we were going in and starting to visit fleets and starting to do a little bit of our discovery is there was a very big difference in performance between fleets that were much more efficient and run much more leaner and fleets that had more manual processes and were struggling with, disjointed systems or actually having a very, very efficient workflow. So that was one of the things that became very apparent. And I think as we started to think about double nickel is the whole idea behind it is if we believe that one, if you can move quicker, you can close better drivers, and two, that if the recruiter can spend more time testing fit and ensuring and building that relationship with the driver, retention is better on the back end. How can we build a system that takes out all of the manual work, all of the admin busy stuff that like doesn't really add value to the driver, so that folks that are handling this process can one, process as fast as possible, and two, maximize the time that they spend with candidates that are interested and qualified versus playing phone tag versus chasing reports and background checks through multiple different places. So I think that's part of the things that we saw, and that's how we think about the ethos behind our system. Let's eliminate everything that is not human connection, human interaction. Let's automate as much as possible without taking away that pixie dust that recruiters have. That is, they know how to close drivers. They know how to sort of get them excited. They know how to bring them in. So I think that's a little bit of the ethos behind DoubleClick on how we think about this problem.
let's talk about your AI virtual recruiter specifically. Let's talk about what you do differently than the 800-pound gorilla TenStreet. We know who they are.
Yeah.
And what is advantage does that give you, Double Nickel? What advantage does that give the fleet owner, and how does that make the driver experience different?
When we were not born with the air recruiter, no, and I think when we started, one of the things that when we were looking at the data, a few things we saw with our first, 5, 10 customers that were very surprising to us, and that were very telling, and that sort of were the inception of the air recruiter.
Mhm.
50, 60% of all applicants were coming overnight or on weekends. And I know everyone says, whenever I see a new lead, I'll call them right away. But most of the mid-sized fleets in the US do not have weekend coverage or night coverage. So we're seeing a lot of drivers coming in, showing interest in the evenings or showing interest over weekends. When you look at the back end and said, hey, what does the conversion look like? You would see that these candidates were converting 50% lower, 75% lower than candidates that were coming in during the day. And one of the main reasons behind that, when we digged into the data, is by the time they got their first call from the recruiter, there has been, 36 hours, 48 hours between the first showing interest and getting that call. Meaning, showing that those drivers were a little bit gone or had gone cold or had gone somewhere else or had lost.
Yeah, they're getting so many calls
Yeah.
day in and day out. They've probably applied 3 or 4 different jobs
Yeah.
since that
So
application.
that was, I think, was one of the things that was very telling. The second thing that was very telling is that we would see driver recruiters as they organize their day, they have their call blocks in consistent times throughout the day. So they might have, I'll do my rounds of calls between, I get in the office, I, brew my coffee, get stuff out of the way, make sure that I follow up on full apps, and then I'm gonna call my leads. That is sort of 10 to 12. I do my rounds, and then I do it again. Some drivers are driving at that time. So I think the
Mhm.
other thing that came to be is like, hey, how can we make sure that the driver sort of is able to tell the recruiter what is the time that works for him or for her to talk? What are those slots? And how can we sort of foster communication that way? That was sort of the second thing that we were trying to solve for. The third one is how many times, if you've ever sat in that recruiting seat, or if you've ever done recruiting of any sorts, you might spend time chasing someone, trying to get them on the phone, to only get them on the phone and find out that they don't have a CDL. And they're actually wondering if you can help them get it. Or that, oh, they thought it was not, it was a solo position, but your ad says teams, big across the top. So it's like recruiters are also spending a lot of time chasing folks that might not be a good fit for the job that they're offering. And I think that's how the AI recruiter came to be. The AI recruiter basically, what it does is, or how we have seen it be most successful is it engages drivers the moment that they show interest. It puts your pre-screening questions at the front, make sure that they meet that criteria. It allows the driver to ask questions about the job and get real answers so they can, self-select themselves out if that is something that they're not interested in. And if those two things click, so to speak, they can set up a time to talk to a recruiter in the next 12 to 36 hours, depending on where we're sitting in the week. So that allows, it does a few things. One, it eliminates that phone tag that happens to get in touch with a recruiter for the first time. Two, it prevents you from chasing leads that are not qualified or do not care about what you're trying to, sell to them. And three, it helps kill that sort of time, that speed to lead. It helps it shrink it so that you're making an impression right away. You're moving as quick as possible. We often get this question, hey, do drivers really want to talk to AI? I would say no. They would rather not talk to AI. They would rather apply on Friday at 7 p.m. and get a call at 7:05 from a real recruiter. Does that happen? Seldom. So I think in the end, what I always try to equate the experience is, if you apply on Friday at 6 p.m. And don't get a call till Monday at 2 p.m. after that recruiter is done with orientation. If it's a small fleet, that person might do HR and safety and they might be done with orientation. That is sort of a scenario that is, would you rather talk to AI 2 minutes after you show interest, learn more about the company, be able to express interest and set up a time to talk to a recruiter the first time they're available? I think the second experience is much better than the first one. And that's, I think, how we think about it and how we try to articulate it to fleets. So that's something that we do very different from some of our competitors. We are not afraid of being bold in some of these ideas and sort of challenge some of the assumptions that are Drivers will never want to talk to AI. The data doesn't say that. No,
Mhm.
I don't
Yeah.
know. A little bit of a long path, but I
Yeah, no,
hopefully answer
No,
no,
the
it's
question.
perfect.
no, I think he's been inside of some of my phone calls or something complaining and because
Justin comes very much from the recruiting side. He's been recruiting for years, 15
yeah,
years.
yeah, and it's you hit all the points. That's one of the reasons why I felt like I was very successful was I did answer the phone or make a call at 7 o'clock or through the weekend. My phone was always on. Now my family, like on you were saying on vacation, they didn't like it at all, but because how I'd structured my businesses, I didn't get paid until they got on the road. So it was very important for me to push that on to the next level of to the onboard or what have you. I like the ideal of the AI getting the calls quick from my point of view. That's very important. I agree with you with drivers. Some of the older drivers probably don't really care much for AI because it's different. They're back wanting to just do it on paper. They want to do it old school. But the new wave technology, they grew up with it. I think that's just the future and everything. Talk about how that helps the retention side because that is the big issue in trucking. I think a lot of times these carriers they don't even care the qualifications of the driver so much. They just want to fill a seat. And when you do that, that seat doesn't stay warm very long and the driver's out the door and they're just redoing the cycle. Could you talk about how maybe your numbers show it, how that a first initial contact to how it smooths and gets the drivers through, how that helps retention? Because one thing that I've learned from all my years, recruiting is the first opening door to that driver of how their impressions of the company and like you said, these onboarders they'll call at 8:30 in the morning. Well, that driver's 90% probably getting loaded or unloaded, and then the onboarder don't call till the next day. And so
At
that really
8:30 again. At
yes,
8:30 again when they're on their next load.
right.
And they
And it
do it
just
three times and then they're done.
yeah. And that just hurts that relationship. So, could you talk a
Yep.
little bit about how that helps retention?
Yeah, that's a great question. How we think about like retention and what we see in our data is two-thirds of all like annual turnover for a fleet typically happen in the first 90 days, which in my mind, that is not necessarily like a turnover problem, it's an onboarding problem. No, I think there's
Mhm.
people that are when we talk to drivers and we try to do this, I would say quarterly, have a few conversations with folks that are either have gone through our process or have left the companies that we work with. And I think what you see oftentimes there, it's multi-factor, no? Like there you can find multiple different things. But the common threads are, I would put it as unmet expectations or unrealized sort of promises. Part of the thesis behind Double Nickel and how it helps recruiters and fleets manage that onboarding process is it generates more capacity for the recruiters to be able to spend more time vetting drivers and ensuring that they're actually representing what the company offers in a proper way. And I think that's also some place that we're starting to go a little bit with our software, and then something that we'll be working on probably in the next quarters is that can we make sure, like, can we use the calls that we're seeing, and all the calls happen through our system. So can we use that to identify recruiters that are doing very well and that are representing that very well and are making sure that everything that is sort of, addressing the call is actually things that can be realized later and sort of keep track on that. That is also something that is very interesting for us. But going back to your question about the pure retention aspect, I think in our head, the more time we free up from recruiters from doing the busy work, the less time they're going to feel that pressure to be just like pushing people through to fill a seat and spend more time in that vetting slash, ensuring that they're a good fit. Versus today, where, you have 10 trucks open, you have the owner barking down your neck. You're going to try to find anyone that meets your insurance criteria and push them into a seat.
Mhm.
Um, but this is obviously something that, recruiting is a piece of it and providing a very good experience for the driver, being swift, making sure the conversations is, the communication is crisp and is clear and getting them quickly and swiftly through the process is a big piece. But I think more than anything is can you make those promises that you did throughout the recruiting process actually crystallize and come to life? Are you going to give them the miles? Are you going to give them the home time? Are you going to, give them the equipment? And I think that's part of expectation setting, but it's also how the fleet runs and how organized things are. So I think there is a little bit of recruiting related, but there's also a big chunk that comes from, what happens once they come into a seat. I'm curious what your experience has been there, but that's I think how we think a little bit about this challenge.
What I've learned from, I've been an agent and I've done the recruiting. You lose drivers because some other recruiter has blown up what they can make. And drivers, they're all about the dollar. If and they'll hear numbers that they know they can't make, but they get promised those numbers will work and they leave ship. And it's the same point you just made. You got 10 trucks, you've got to get those trucks on the road. And they don't think about, well, okay, well, half these drivers or more aren't going to be here in 30 days, and I'm going to have to redo the whole cycle again. I want to follow up with one other thing.
Yeah.
How has your experience been going into these carriers, offering your type of technology to where I've say on this show all the time, trucking is probably one of the furthest behind technology industries in the country. Why I don't know. It just seems like it's not always wanted, but like we're saying, the 800-pound gorilla. You're having to compete with them. How has it been? What is your strategies going to land like a Maverick? How do you go about doing that without giving out your trade secrets, of course.
No, I don't think there's a lot of trade secrets in there. I would say if you think trucking is behind in terms of technology, like driver recruiting, I think it's lagging even more. No,
Hmm.
there has been a lot of innovation that has happened. Like you've created some, trucking has bred some amazing companies over the last, 10, 15 years that are at the forefront of innovation. There's been a lot of innovation on the TMS side. There's been a lot of innovation on the telematics side with some SATA motives, etc. of this world. Now, like going beyond that, you have, Gen Logs and those kind of companies that I think in the operational side, I think the size of the price has been so big that there's been a lot of, and on the safety side, there's been a lot of innovation. Probably still behind some other industries, maybe. But I think driver recruiting, on the contrary, I think has been, has seen a lot less innovation.
Hmm.
Partially, it might be related to, the strong position that that the main incumbent held and how comfortably they held to that position. But as we go into these fleets and, talk about, the opportunities, I think where they actually see value is in starting a few things. One, someone that is listening to them and actually addressing some of the challenges that they continue to face day to day. So yes, the main incumbent has helped to digitize and orchestrate a little bit of the workflow and put it into, what used to be paper is now on screens, or what used to be spreadsheets is now on a workflow that is organized. But going beyond that and taking work off the plate of the recruiter and actually do the work for them so they can spend more times chasing, and keeping the drivers on the hook. I think that has been something that has lacked. And when they see double nickel, they're like, I am seeing sort of no one in any recruiting department says, "Oh, I have 6 hours to spare this week. I'm just gonna play golf on Friday afternoon," right? They start to see that they're still like,
Right.
"Holy shit, I'm making 100 calls, and now like this can do the calls for me." Or hey, I can I see how I spend X amount of time chasing verifications of employment, and now that is done automatically by the system. So they start to see real, true tasks that used to be, you know, I would say like crappy low value add work that they were doing, very repetitive, very manual, get back. Like that is time that they get back. And hopefully they can use that to keep drivers on the hook. And then maybe if they're lucky and then they have a full class next week, maybe they can play golf at least 9 holes on a Friday afternoon and so. So that's I think the things that they start to see. When you ask me about what they also sort of why they come over and why they make the leap, I think it also has to do with the ability for us to listen to the customer. We don't have a preconceived view. We're not in love with our technology. We're not sort of married to what we have built. And we are at a place where, with the advancements of technology, with, our platform being, built and started to, our code base goes no longer than 2023, that makes us very nimble. So allows us to pivot, allows us to change, allows us to move much more quicker. And that helps, I think, for some of these carriers that we go to, they're like, we've been feeling unheard for the last 10 years. So I think if you can go there and show, oh, I would love to see this. And before there used to be something that, was put on a follow-up email and never addressed. And now next week, ooh, it's there. You see it on the screen. Right. So I think the ability to be nimble and listen to them and actually build for what recruiting teams care about is
Mhm.
something that they value. And in the end, if you think that something is good now and with your feedback it gets implemented quicker, it's like, what is, the sky's the limit. In the end, we just keep this iterating process. And that's what we lean on. We don't have a preconceived view. We don't have a take on, oh, this should not be possible, or this should be possible. We're listening to our customers, understanding what works, pressure testing if we feel something might be a little bit off, and then implementing and learning from what we see in the data.
You said that double nickel is the number one 10 Street alternative. That takes guts.
Mhm.
That's a strong statement. To those carriers out there that are like, hey, like just like you said, I've been looking for an alternative. I'm spending crazy amount of money. I'm not getting listened to. I'm not getting my emails answered. I'm not getting what I'm paying for, or it's just been the same system for the last 10 years. And this isn't to bash on 10 Street by any means. They've been, a great company for a long time, but you have carriers who want to make a change. What do you tell them who, they're scared, they've got all their data in there, they're scared to make that change? What's that process like moving ATS systems?
That's a great question. I think, I don't equate her to, to changing TMSs. That's like open heart surgery, but this is
Hmm.
like open gut surgery, It's like it's less critical, but it's
Hmm.
still quite painful and it can
I
be
don't know. My
quite
gut's
quick.
pretty complicated.
But I think what this is something that we hear often, right? Hey,
Yeah.
I am hiring, especially now with, dealing with larger customers, is, hey, I'm hiring 15, 20 drivers a week. How do we make sure we have no downtime? How do we make sure what happens to my data? Is that going to come over? Like, there have my driver qualification files in there. So I think there are a few things that have been, you know, that we have leaned in significantly is we understand that we acknowledge that is daunting. Two, try to sort of walk them through very clearly by putting them in touch with other customers that have gone recently through a process so they can understand sort of what that means and hear sort of firsthand from someone that has gone through it. But also we've iterated on, what does that onboarding process look like many times. But basically, what we tell to their fleets is we spend significant amount of time with them, helping us understand their workflow today and pressure testing how we can translate that into double nickel in the most effective way. Because oftentimes, you've probably all gone through, system changes. It is the opportunity to pressure test your process. And I think that's what we lean in a lot. Let's pressure test the process. Let's make it simpler, more efficient as possible, and use the tool to the best advantage of that process versus just lift and shift. So we invest, a significant amount of time, I would say probably 3 to 4 weeks ahead of making the switch on that. And then we put them into hypercare for the first 6 to 8 weeks, where we meet with them, weekly or sometimes even more than that, to continue to tweak, to continue to answer questions, to continue to train the team. And as part of that, we transfer the data over. We've done it, I would say dozens of times by now. The data come through from TenStreet, and TenStreet have been, very fair in that game, and they provide the data in a timely manner. So the process, I would say, takes, depending on how fast, our carriers can move, can take 4 to 5 weeks, full end to end. And if they want to do a little bit more, prep ahead of the change, that can be a little bit longer. But that's what it typically looks like.
So I want to get into something that is the talk of everything now in transportation. You got your, compliance verification, all the industry risk that we have nowadays with all the fraud and the non-domicile CDL drivers and everything that's going on that we see in the news. Do y'all have some type of platform, or are y'all thinking of some type of platform to try to help get drivers verified? What is, with y'all being then tech savvy, what is y'all thoughts on that part of the industry?
It's very interesting. I actually wrote a little bit of a piece on this based on the SCOTUS sort of ruling.
Mhm.
I think more and more there's an opportunity to, I think fleets, I think they're like providers of risk, compliance, safety sort of platforms. I think there is an opportunity for those to go a little bit further and build data products that can help, especially brokers, understand, hey, what is, for example, double nickel holds driver qualification files for all of our customers, right? Is there a data product that could be consumed by brokers where carriers can share this information with brokers and say, hey, look, double nickel says 99% of my drivers are compliant currently. So I do think the industry, it started happening with fraud, I think, over the last 2, 3 years, where a lot of players emerged saying, hey, I'm going to provide data so you can verify that, a carrier who is claiming a load is actually that carrier, is not someone else. I think this is sort of, that was very tailored to brokers. I think there's also now starting to be an opportunity of saying, hey, I actually, I'm going to tell the broker, I'm going to create something that allows a platform that allows the broker to understand, hey, does this driver or does this carrier meet all of the in real time versus safer data that you see that is stalled for the last year, right? So I do see players going in that direction. I also see a lot of challenges from a perspective of like some of this might be a little bit at odds with employment regulation and drivers providing information to you ahead of time. And what does that mean? So yes, we hold MBRs and we cite driver license for a lot of our drivers, but we cannot mark a driver as verified, to another carrier. Like I think there's something that we need to figure out there. There's how do we exchange that information in compliance with state regulation about employment, with with driver like privacy laws, consumer reporting agency, regulations. I think that's a challenge that as an industry we need to maybe dive a little bit deeper. But I do see a lot of value in potentially being able to provide brokers that are now liable for a lot of these things with a way of verifying if a carrier is actually, crossing the T's and dotting the I's.
Justin walked you right into that question to discuss what we're doing at ReadyApp. He walked you right into it. He could have just come out and said it, but he wanted to
I
get your opinion beforehand.
I
I
almost dropped it in
mean,
there and said like
I
what you
mean,
guys are doing.
he just wants to see how you answer before he
Yeah,
mentions the benefits of ReadyApp, which is
that's
what
right.
we're building on the, outside this show. That's our day job. This is what we do for fun. So, and, but
Yeah.
that's what our team is talking about right now. So, ReadyApp was initially built as an ATS, and then we started getting a lot of interest from insurance companies and brokers and saying, hey, can you help us with driver verification? And it wasn't really, we were kind of like outside the lane trying to move our way in. And then this new SCOTUS ruling came out, and all of a sudden now we've been pushed into that lane. And that's what our development team is currently working on.
I wouldn't go build an ATS. I don't know
Yeah.
if I would do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Yeah.
immediately pivoted. So
Yeah.
there is value and there's no one really doing it right now. And I think there's a lot of opportunities. You own the front door to the recruiting funnel, the ATS, the DQ file, the compliance side, the AI recruiter that calls. That's your turf and you built it beautifully. Ready App sits on the driver's side. And that's not what I'm here to really talk about today, but we give the driver one verified driver passport. They own the information, their work history, their CDL, their MVR, their PSP, and then they can share it with whoever they need to, which is extremely valuable on the, not just on the application side, but also on the broker side and dealing with DOT
Yeah.
officers. And part of the reason why drivers get in trouble when they get pulled over by a DOT officer is because they don't have the right paperwork. They left it at home. It's covered in dirt. It's like in the back of their truck somewhere, and they're not prepared, and it and
Yeah.
it puts them in a bad situation. But
Yeah.
I think there's definitely an opportunity to discuss maybe outside this show. Justin, that was a great way to lead into that question.
Well done. Good
Well
segue.
done.
Well, but one
Well,
thing that I think it's also very interesting, and we've discussed this idea multiple
no.
times. I think what I am still trying to like, and you can edit this if this is irrelevant, but I think what I'm still trying to sort of, wrap my head around is how do you do that without being at odds with your customers, right? Like owning a relationship with the driver and allowing the driver to hold stuff in there. And like, how do you do that
Yeah, and that's
without
what
being at
so
odds with
yeah, so
your
we've
customer
talked
base?
about that at ReadyApp in
Yeah.
numerous meetings and with our investor meetings, and the driver has to own the data, right? The driver has to own it. They have to control where they share it to. It's kind of like we've created our own HIPAA, where the
Yeah.
driver is in control of that information and can share it in a matter of seconds,
Yeah.
they have to own it.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away from like we're talking about doing a prequal with HireRight, where the driver can basically pull their background check, pull their MVR, let them know where they stand, and create a baseball card that basically shows them where they stand themselves and also amongst their peers.
Yeah.
That doesn't take away from them having to the carrier still having to pull the MVR and background
Yeah.
check,
That's
but
compliance.
it gives
Mhm.
them the driver chooses to share that information with the carrier in which they're applying to, and then the carrier can make an informed decision before they go and spend money on pulling that, background check themselves.
That's what like a lot there's sort of this suspicion on the other side with our with the main incumbent about having those two things. No, when you have the two sides of the you could have Chinese walls and very clear Chinese walls between the two worlds, but it's still someone might be saying, "Hey, I'm putting all of my data into double nickel." Double
Mhm.
nickel then is asking those drivers to create profiles and keep their thing. Like how who are
Yeah,
they?
it has to be separate, and that's
Yeah.
something that
Yeah.
we've discussed with some of your competitors, and that's something that that's why ReadyApp cannot be an ATS.
Yeah, correct. And that's why I always
ReadyApp
say we
cannot be an
cannot have
ATS. Yeah,
we cannot have an app for drivers because I think
exactly,
that those
exactly.
two things
So
are
maybe there's an opportunity to work together. We'll
that
talk.
that
Yeah.
100%. That
Yeah,
I think we can definitely talk about.
that's exactly right.
I
Yeah,
think that was always an interesting discussion. Go ahead. Let's
but
go.
I do want to get your opinion on something because this I think is actually important to both of us with ReadyApp and Double Nickel. I think let's go big picture. So autonomous trucks, Aurora is running 250,000 driverless miles on I-45 between Dallas and Houston. Kodiak is live in the Permian Basin. Plus AI is signing operational contracts with carriers. Einride is prepping Spock, and there's also this new trailer that doesn't even need the truck. So these companies are coming out with these autonomous trucks. There's a new company now that has the trailer just by itself, and it has an AI system. It's incredible. The
Mhm.
whole sector hit 575 million in valuation last year. The argument from the autonomy side is simple. A human driver gets 11 hours of service. An autonomous truck can run 20. That math is brutal. So here's the question. If autonomous trucks really do scale over the next 5 to 10 years, what does that do to a company like Double Nickel that exists to hire human drivers?
I think we obviously get this question asked a lot, especially from folks from outside the industry, investors, people, that are more curious about what we're building more from the corporate development side. I think our thesis is, probably over the course of the next 15, 20 years, autonomous will evolve significantly.
Mhm.
I think the consensus across the industry is that drivers will be far from going away. I think drivers will continue to play a significant role in a lot of things. So today, when we work with a lot of fleets that are flatbed fleets, drivers do much more than just driving, right?
Correct.
They arrive at the location, they're your face to the customer, they treat they interact with your customers, they sort of get, in this case, some of our carriers move blades, for like windmills. They load that into the trailer, they secure the load, they strap the load, and then they do the other thing at destination. So that's sort of like, I think drivers do a lot more than just drive, and they'll continue to be an important player in the space. What might happen is that their work might get significantly better. No, there will be less accidents, there will be, less stressful hours on the road. Um, so that is
It doesn't, so recruiting doesn't go away. It just changes shape, right?
it's just
Mhm.
changing. I think it will change shape, and obviously, there might be a future in 50 years where this has completely reshuffled because there's a few more angles. So that is one. Two, if drivers also fix small breakdowns on the road, like if your truck breaks in the middle, between I don't know, Arizona and Texas, how is, AI
We've
going
talked to, I've said
Yeah.
that numerous times on this show. Like, what happens
to
if you're driving up I-75 and the truck is in the middle of the lane and it just stops? Just
Yeah.
slows down
Or,
and
or you
stops
or
right
you
in the middle
burst
of
a
the lane.
tire, right? Like
Yeah.
It can't get out and put the little orange triangles out around it to even alert you to, hey, you need to go
uh,
around it.
so I
Exactly.
think that's another angle. The other thing that I would say is um also drivers continue to, so they do small fixes, they do more work beyond just driving the truck, but
Mhm.
there's some things AI is very good at, like in traffic where there's context. No, it operates very well in context. When you're in a
Mhm.
highway, it's very clear that they're in a highway, all the vehicles are going the same way, there's very clear demarcated exits. When you're in a yard, like it can be a lot less structured, I would say, no? And you need to back
Mhm.
into one of the, like it's not as clear. So I think drivers will continue to play a role in small haul. And then I think local work will continue to be a big thing, no? Like I don't know, if you think about New York City, like these delivery drivers are magicians. Like they put they find space for the trucks that I don't know if I don't know if it's even in like in accordance with traffic rules, but they're able to find it so they can offload. So I think there's a number of things. There's also the realpolitik aspect of it that is these are a lot of jobs. No, so I know like there's sort of, innovation can sometimes be, a little bit, it doesn't get stopped by that. But, as you think about the legislative aspect of allowing this to happen at scale,
Oh, it takes one accident.
yeah,
Yep.
One
because also
accident.
nobody wants to sign off on a bill that might eradicate 3 million jobs. No,
Mhm.
Very
I think
true.
it's a tricky bill to sign off on, and I think hopefully it doesn't happen. But every accident that happens along the way that has casualties or fatalities will put us back of like no, a few years. It happened recently with some of the Waymo roll-ups. No, like there was a Waymo accident that put or a cruise accident, the GM one, backed one, no, a few years ago that put back the rollout of it. It killed the program. So I think it's tricky. I don't know if some people say in 5 years we're going to have fully autonomous. I'm a little bit less. I think drivers will continue to play a big role for a big time. Their job will get better, and maybe that can help alleviate some of the challenges that we have in hiring drivers.
I kind of agree with you. I think the short hauls, the local is going to be probably more of those type of trucks on the road. I even think maybe they come up with a larger box truck that can handle more freight in the inner cities. That you'll need a driver to offload and all that. And maybe, like I said, it does make it to where the drivers, it's a job that people want, appreciate, and you get better applicants, and then maybe that makes everybody's job a little easier. I have a question that's really my last question, not really pertaining to the business, but it is about the business. How'd you come up with the name?
Great question. I think we always get this question, and we thought it
Yeah.
would resonate more with our audiences. And sometimes people are like, "Oh, I didn't know that." So double nickel stands for 55, and it
Hmm.
used to be the old interstate speed
Yep.
limit. And at the same time, it used to be perceived by sort of safety and operations professionals as sort of the optimum trade-off between like speed and fuel efficiency slash safety.
Okay.
Mhm.
So we consider that to be a little bit of a subliminal message on what Double Nickel, does as software for your recruiting process. No, we help you go fast while also making sure that you're ticking the compliance boxes. I would say we thought it would resonate much more with folks, but oftentimes they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know it used to be the speed limit." So I think it's like it's part of the tracking lingo that is in the generational change is starting to get lost, but
Yeah.
that's what it stands for.
Awesome. Well, I do feel like, going back to the autonomous for just a second, because I want to get into like AI, a lot of recruiters too on their side. It's not just drivers worried about their job, which I think is a little further off than the AI actually taking possibly recruiters out of their jobs themselves. Do you feel like Double Nickel is automating them out of a job? Do you feel like what do you think is going to happen to recruiters and processors? I feel like recruiting is like the personal link into getting their vital, and that's like it's almost like a sales professional, right? Like we've tried some of the sales AI, some of the massive calls. They can't work themselves through auto attendants. Drivers are a little different. They don't have auto attendants like that. But there is a relationship side to sales that I don't think you can ever truly automate.
Yeah.
However, the processing side you can. So, how many,
Yeah.
in 5 years, what's that going to look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, what is this saying that is now going around quite a bit that is, AI will not take your job, but someone that uses AI very well will probably do.
Mhm.
No. So I think it's some of these things that are like, imagine going back in time, no, and thinking about, the period pre-industrial revolution where you have, people sort of doing, weaving cotton in their houses and then putting that together and then like, I think it's something that you cannot stop, right? I think it's just like the innovation will not stop and will continue to push. How we see it, I do agree 100% with you on the sales side. I think nobody's going to take a job. I think it applies to every line of work without ever talking to a human at that company. No, I think you don't take a full-time job with someone and
Right.
never talk to someone throughout the recruiting process. You might have,
Sure.
sometimes you might even feel like it's too many interviews, for some of the corporate jobs in America now. It's like 25
That's
interviews.
true.
It's like how many managers do you have? Why do you have all these people there?
Yeah.
But I don't think our driver is gonna, talk to AI, get their MBR processed, and then just come join, get an automated email. Hey, you're expected at the terminal on Monday at 8 a.m. and we'll just show up.
Yeah. Well, we're in real trouble if that happens.
So I do think the recruiters bring like a lot of value to that process in building those human connections and making sure that the driver feels that what they're offering is real and understanding what the driver is actually looking for and making sure they can hit on the right points on the value prop of that company and hooking the driver in and bringing him in. How we think about, what we do is can we take away all of the busy work that happens between them? No, between someone showing interest and that first conversation, and after that first conversation and making a decision to hire. And that's, I think, where the processor comes in. I do think there's an opportunity for fleets to rethink that. I think today, what used to, how the processor, came to be is fleets where, hey, I have people that are very good at selling. I don't want them wasting time chasing verifications of employment or reviewing sort of in detail some of these MBRs and making adjustments to the application. So they said, okay, let's create two teams, one that is more back-end focused and one that holds a relationship with the driver. I think this provides an opportunity, if you're successful on saying, hey, this becomes, less work. A lot of that busy work gets reduced, gets automated. And a lot of that, then recruiters can own their relationship end to end again. Or the other way of thinking about it is, and how some of our customers have started to shift their paradigm is thinking processors are very sort of expertise, nuanced on reviewing drivers that are on the fence. Hey, yes, you have your insurance guidelines. You can flex them a little bit every now and then, but you also have, hey, this driver doesn't have 2 points on their MBR, but they also have this here. Hey, I might need an expert review. It's not a clear sort of pass or fail. No. So using some of that for the edge cases and using that capacity for the edge cases, I do think that's where it's going. So every time we talk to recruiters that are sort of, it's also for us a good sign of like fit. If they come with that idea, if that come with that mindset, I think it's probably not a good fit for us to work together. We want folks that are really, looking to embrace new technology, to give time back to their teams and rethink how they do their process, not just, want to sort of lift and shift.
So you raised seed in May of 25. You've got real momentum, real customers, real revenue. What's the next 12 months look like? What are you building right now that you're most excited about?
So I think the next 12 months, I think it's continuing to build relationships with the space. I think this is, part of what we're trying to do now is, participate in these forums to put our name out there, to get more fleets that are looking for alternatives, that at least want to know what else is out there, get in front of them. So I think that's where I'm spending today a lot of my time. We're also starting to see a lot more traction with larger fleets, anywhere from 500 to 1500 or so. And that's, I think, where we see a lot of opportunity to bring some of these more sophisticated automation use cases and actually have them deliver true hard ROI, especially in this market that is going on where, I was talking to a fleet last week and they have doubled their marketing expenses over the course of the last 3 months and still are not able to meet their target. We're actually working on a few things that I think are interesting. The one that for me is sort of can be a game changer is we have this vision of going from a full application to the ability to do a conditional offer in seconds. We're working on an agent to extract and understand background checks and reports. And we're going to combine that with agentic technology that can apply your hiring guidelines to that abstract from the driver. So the idea is, can we go from a full app to running the reports that you need to make a conditional offer, understanding and interpreting those reports, and making a recommendation on hiring?
Awesome. Well, before we close out, where can people find you? Where do they go to learn more about Double Nickel if they want to book a demo?
You can always find us on our website, www.getdoublenickel.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn and on Facebook. You can find time there. You can also reach me at Fran, F-R-A-N, at getdoublenickel.com. Send me a note if you want to learn more. Happy to share more information and book time to share what we're building and see if we might be a good fit for any of the carriers out there that are looking for an alternative or want to at least stay up to date with what's available.
Awesome. Well, Francisco, this has generally been a fun conversation. We've really appreciated your perspective. Justin, you want to go ahead and close us out and thank our sponsors?
Yeah. So we want to thank our sponsors who bring this show to the audience. So this episode is brought to you by Gray Cross. That is graycross.org. Gray Cross is focused on supporting trucking families and people who keep America moving every day. When a driver or trucking family faces emergencies, financial hardship, loss of income, or loss of life, Gray Cross steps in, helps any way they can, financially, support of any type. The trucking industry is built and around sacrifice, long hours, and times away from family, and Gray Cross exists to make sure drivers and loved ones are not facing these challenges alone. I urge each and every one of you to take 5 minutes, go to the website, review it, see the good things they're doing. They would appreciate $1, $5 donations. No amounts too small. It's all going to good causes, to people that affect our lives every day, even if you don't realize it. So go check them out. It's graycross.org.
Yeah, they are a 501c3, and it is we lose 13,000 truck drivers on the road a year, and a lot of times they are the sole breadwinner. So go check them out, graycross.org.
Most definitely. And we want to thank ReadyApp, our main sponsor. ReadyApp has helped modernizing the connection between drivers, carriers, and brokers and recruiters through the verified driver profile and streaming onboarding tools, especially for trucking. Drivers, go get your driver's passport. Inside that passport, it's free. You can go in, you can upload all your documents, onboarding documents, endorsements, tickets, DOT inspections. All that can be put in one place. You can easily share it with the click of a button to an onboarder, to a recruiter, to a insurance company. We're fixing to come out with the DOT side where you'll be able to just hand the DOT a QR code. They'll have all your information digitized. So it's time to get trucking into the next, into the 21st, 22nd century and digitize it. So go check out ReadyApp. They're doing a lot of good things. It's ready-app.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. Everyone drive safe. Francisco Lopez Roualdes, I hope, did I say that right? Did I get it right? Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Yep. Check us out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, all the popular podcast sites, on YouTube. Share us, like us, Facebook. We're getting on TikTok, all the good things. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time on Behind the Wheelhouse.